All right, guys. So as promised, here is kind of our recap, follow up to solving any kind of equations or inequalities. Just kind of as I mentioned before, I saw some stuff as I was grading the handful of tests that I did or that I was able to look at. I saw some stuff that I just wanted to reiterate and make sure we clarify. The big reason that I'm going this route or willing to do this is because there were so many people again that missed the quiz the first time around, either because of quarantine or being sick the day before or not in school the day of the quiz, and also the fact that last year was kind of cut short. And I understand that you guys with having a long-term sub last year and then with the actual shutdown, some of this stuff may have not sunk in exactly as well as it has in the past for previous groups of students. So we're just going to take this time, just take a couple days here to go back over stuff, hopefully fill in the gaps, get everybody back up to speed. But then at that point, we do have to continue to press forward, okay? So we're going to take one day here to kind of recap and refresh all these solving basic equation steps, okay? And what I did was I went ahead and like I said, I was a little bit more thorough this time. I wrote down sort of the 6 steps, and I know when people probably see that the first time, they're like, oh man, I got to remember 6 steps. But it's the 6 steps that you guys all are at least somewhat familiar with. Some of you have them basically memorized. You don't even think about them as steps. You just do them when you see them without actually having to think through the step-by-step process. So just to kind of go through them real quick, and then we'll sort of bounce back and forth with our 4 examples that we have down here. The first step is always got to be parentheses, okay? We always, if there's any equation or inequality that we're trying to solve that has parentheses, we have to distribute the number that's attached to the outside, and when we distribute, of course, we're doing multiplying, okay? So we have to distribute, we have to multiply the outside part by the inside part. Now, the part that I did notice that got a couple people on the quiz was the fraction problem. So you'll see here the very first example I have is one very much like the fraction problem on the quiz itself. So we're going to talk our way through this one when we get to it. But I'm just going to kind of remind you guys that that these problems that involve fractions, you can deal with them right away, okay? As the second step in most cases, and in some cases it's the first step. But we're going to talk about that when we get to it. And then these are the steps that, like I said, most people don't even really register or think about these as being an actual step-by-step process. Everybody kind of just knows you simplify the sides into no more than 2 terms. If there are split variables, meaning variables on the opposite sides, you move the smaller one, then you do your adding and subtracting and your dividing, okay? So we'll just kind of bounce back and forth, but kind of keeping these steps up here just to hopefully get anybody who still has some lingering confusions with this stuff or lingering problems or struggles, just trying to get everybody back to an even playing field, okay? All right, so looking at the first one, all right, solving for y in the first example here, there are no parentheses, so we can kind of go about this as like a check mark process. Like there are no parentheses, there's no distribution that needs to take place. But what there are fractions. So what we do is we distribute the denominator. If there's more than one denominator, then we distribute the common denominator. But in this case, what we do here, and you guys will remember this from a couple weeks ago, we put parentheses around the whole problem and we distribute a 3. Okay, so distributing a 3 there and there is really easy. It's literally 3 times 20 is 60 and 3 times 12 is 36. But right here is the reason for the distribution. When you take 3 times 2/3 y, and kind of just do our work over here, it's 3, which written as a fraction is 3 over 1. So 3 times 2/3 y. We can see with fraction multiplication, that's when we do our cross canceling. We've done a lot of cross canceling in the month or a little over a month that we've been in school. But we can see the 3's cross cancel, we're left with 2 over 1, which is just 2. So this literally just becomes 2y. So I had all sorts of people on the quiz last week that really struggled with this one. They were, people were wanting to solve this one like the old school way. So they wanted to subtract 12 from both sides, which is fine. But then you end up with 2/3 y equals 8. And then I had all sorts of issues with this. Like I said, if you do that, you get 2/3 y equals 8. And then I had people trying to remember, like, well, do I divide by 2/3? We definitely don't do that. We can't divide fractions. So do I multiply by the reciprocal? And if I multiply by the reciprocal, how do I do that? And there was just a lot of confusion with that problem on the quiz, the fraction problem. And so, I know we didn't specifically have one on the practice quiz, but we did do a lot of this discussion when we were going through solving equations and inequalities early on. And that's what we said. If there are fractions in the problem, get rid of them right away. Distribute the denominator or the common denominator so that they're gone. So distribute this 3, and this now becomes a much easier problem to work with. Okay, you just subtract 36 from both sides. The 36 is canceled. You're left with 2y by itself. And 60 minus 36 is obviously 24. Divide by 2. Your 2's cancel. You're left with y equals 12. Now again, could I have gotten that another way? Absolutely. If I would have just if I'd have just done this the usual way by, again, subtracting 12 from both sides at the very beginning, subtract 12, 20 minus 12 is 8. We get 8 equals 2/3 y. You could have solved this on the quiz by multiplying by the reciprocal. Because remember, the goal is to get the y by itself. So if you just multiply 2 over 3 by 3 over 2, the 3's cross cancel, the 2's cross cancel, you get y. But then you would have needed to multiply this side, the 8, by 3 over 2. So it becomes 3 over 2 times 8 over 1. You can cross simplify here if you want, or you can just multiply. 3 times 8 on top is 24. Bottom is 2 times 1, but 24 over 2 or 24 divided by 2 gets you right back to 12. But again, it's a lot easier with these problems that involve fractions if you just distribute the denominator right away. But again, this only works for just regular equations and inequalities when you're trying to solve. Okay? At any rate, we did the fractions. I kind of glanced past these next two steps, but once we got rid of our denominator, all that was left was to subtract 36 and divide by 2. So step 5 and step 6. So if you really look at the steps we actually did there, we only had, for number 1, we only had to do step 2, step 5, and step 6. Okay? For problem number 2, again, we're going to kind of go through this nice and slow, take our time today, and hopefully get everybody, I know I've said this a couple times, but hopefully get everybody back up to speed. The first thing that we have to do, you guys, is we have to get rid of the parentheses. So anything not in or attached to the parentheses in this problem is simply going to move down to the next step. Okay? The only thing that we're going to do right now is we're going to get rid of the parentheses by multiplying the outside into the inside. It's going to look like distributive property. So the only thing that we are going to touch in this first step for number 2 is the -3, and we're going to distribute it into the parentheses. Everything else has to drop down because step 1 has to be distribute to get rid of parentheses. So this 15 drops down, the equals -24 drops down, and we distribute. -3 times 8 is -24. And then -3 times x is -3x. Okay? So you can see it there. The parentheses are now gone. We've multiplied the -3. We've distributed into the parentheses. And we're ready to move on. So if we just kind of follow along here, and you guys can, I mean, this video will be in Classroom along with your assignment as well. So if you want to just kind of take a picture of these steps or whatever you want to do to have these steps out as you're working through the assignment for today, feel free to do that, okay? So we distribute to get rid of parentheses. There are no fractions to work with, so I don't need to worry about step 2, but step 3 does apply here. It says, simplify the sides to no more than 2 terms. So the right side is fine, it's 1 term, it's just the -24, but the left side is 3 separate terms, 15, 24, and 3x. That's 3 separate terms, which means at least 2 of them have to be like terms. The like terms are right next to each other right here. 15 minus 24 is -9. Okay, so in this case, I was able to do step 3. I was able to simplify or combine 2 like terms down, and then I can bring everything else down. -3x equals -24. This side now has 2 terms, and those 2 terms are totally different. It's one of them's got an x and one of them doesn't. Okay? We don't have, on this problem, we don't have any more variables. We don't have split variables, so we still don't have a problem, or we haven't seen a problem that has step 4 in play here, if split variables move the smaller one. So what this means is once we get to realizing that there's only one variable now, we should be down to our last 2 steps. Add or subtract, and then divide away our coefficient. So in this case, I need to, since 9 is negative, I need to add 9 to both sides. Okay, those go. I'm left with negative 3x equals negative 15. And then, as always, we divide our last step. We divide by negative 3. We get x equals 5. One thing worth mentioning here, if this would have been an inequality, it's a negative 3 that we divided by, we would have flipped our symbol. There was an issue on the quiz with a couple people that there was only 1 or 2 inequalities that you actually solved on the quiz, but I had a handful of people forget to flip the symbol when we divided by a negative. Okay? So just remember that if you're dealing with an inequality, that's that one extra thing you got to pay attention to, is if at that last step right here, when you divide your coefficient away, if it was a negative coefficient, then you'd have to flip your sign. Okay? All right, moving on. Number 3 would cause some problems for a lot of people until I ask them basically just to slow down their thought process and just think about what we can do here. Okay? We've seen in the process of getting things in slope-intercept form, we've seen these kinds of compound inequalities. Usually it's an x here, but it looks something like 3x plus 5 all over 4. So we've seen this. You can break this apart. Okay? We call it the Hart method. Breaking apart a compound fraction, it's basically just distribution but for division, essentially, because you're dividing 2 separate things by 4. So instead of multiplying 2 separate things, you're dividing 2 separate things. So we're going to divide 3m by 4. So we're going to do the same thing we do when this is a linear equation. We're going to write the fraction 3 over 4, and we're going to pull the m off to the side. So the 3m over 4 is going to look like this, 3/4 m, plus 5 over 4 is going to stay as 5/4. Bring down our equals 8. All we did there is that really simple method for breaking apart a compound fraction, okay? Once we do that, we don't have to think any differently than we have so far. We follow our 6 steps. Step 1 is if there are parentheses, distribute. Well, there are no parentheses, but what there definitely are is fractions. So what do we do with fractions? Get rid of them right away rather than dealing with them the entire time. Distribute the bottom. So I'm going to create a set of parentheses here. I'm going to put a set of parentheses around the whole problem so that I can show I'm going to distribute a 4 to all terms. I'm going to do 4 times 8, 4 times 3/4 m, and 4 times 5/4. So 4 times 8 is 32. And then right here, this is going to be the super nice part. When you distribute a 4 to both of these terms, literally just the bottom disappears, right? Because this is 3 over 4 times 4. The 4's will cross cancel. You'll be left with the 3 and the m. And then the exact same thing happens to the 5/4 because it's also got a perfect denominator of 4. The 4's cross cancel, and you're literally left with just the 5. Okay, so what looked like a really, probably for a lot of people, a pretty confusing problem at the start, and we probably had a lot of uncertainty or doubt about it, actually ended up being a really simple problem, right? We just break apart our compound fraction, distribute the bottom of the fractions to get rid of it, and then we're left with just our, basically, once we deal with our fractions on this one, all we're left with is there's only 2 terms on this side, there's only 1 term on this side, so I definitely don't need to simplify the sides. I don't have split variables because I only have the 1 variable. That means I'm automatically down to step 5 and 6. Add or subtract and then divide. Subtract 5. You get 27 equals 3m. Divide away your coefficient. We're left with m equals 9. Okay? So again, no need to make that more complicated than it is. All right? And I'm going to wrap this up here because I want to keep our videos at about 20 minutes. I'd like you guys to have a little bit of time in class here yet to get started on the worksheet that's attached to Google Classroom. Again, This video is also attached to Google Classroom if you find yourself needing to look back at something or look back at the steps here. But one more time, let's go through this. All 6 steps. Let's check them off. Parentheses. There are parentheses in this problem. So we are going, oh, you guys can't even see my check marks here. All right, I'm checking them off on the side here as I go through them. That's all right, not a big deal. All right, there are parentheses. So they're the only thing I'm going to deal with in the first step of this problem. I'm going to distribute my 3, which means multiply. So 3 times negative 2x is negative 6x. 3 times 4 is 12. So when I distribute to get rid of my parentheses, I'm left with negative 6x plus 12. Anything not in the parentheses just moves down to the next step. Okay, so we can go through here. Step 2, check for fractions. There are 9. Step 3, check these 2 sides. Make sure there's no more than 2 terms. Well, this side is just 2 terms. One of them's an x, one of them's not. I can't put them together. This side is just 2 terms. One of them's an x, one of them's not. I can't put them together. So step 3 does not apply. Step 4, this is the first time or the only time in this notes sheet where we actually ran into it. There are split variables. There are 2 variables left and they are on opposite sides. So it says step 4, if split variables move the smaller. So on the left-hand side of the equation is a negative 4x. On the right-hand side of the equation is a negative 6x. Negative 6 is smaller than negative 4. So I need to move this term to the other side, just like up over here where I moved this positive 5 to the other side. To get rid of it or to move it, I do the opposite. So to get rid of it in this case was subtraction. It's the same concept here, except I don't want to subtract negative 6x because it's already negative 6. I want to add to move it. I'm going to add 6x. What that's going to do is these will cancel. Negative 6x plus 6x is 0x, but it'll effectively move it from the right side to the left side. Now I can put it together with the negative 4. Negative 4 plus 6 is 2x. Bring down the plus 2. Bring down the equals 12. And that's, like I said all along, that's how simple it is when you have split variables. You just add or subtract to move the smaller one to the other side. Okay? And at this point, once you deal with that, you're automatically down to your last 2 steps. Again, we subtract 2. We get 2x equals 10. And then last step is always to divide. So divide by 2, we get x equals 5. Okay? All right, so keeping in mind what we have moving forward as a plan, you guys. Right now, the short term is pretty simple. The short term plan is you're going to just do your assignment today. You're going to make sure that you can handle all this variety of multi-step equations. Whether they have fractions or not, you got to be able to deal with them. It's a lot easier, as I've said all along, if you just deal with the fractions early as step 2. So for now, it's just making sure that you're good with this. But remember, this is going to progress very fast. Tomorrow, I'll be sharing a video with you guys kind of introducing or reintroducing or reminding you about linear equations, writing linear equations, and we're going to have, I'm going to give you guys 2 days. I'm going to give you the 2 days to kind of recap and really try and bear down if you're still struggling with those linear equations, because I'm not willing to sacrifice more than these 4 days, right? These first 3 days of recapping this first half of chapter 1, and then on Thursday, offering up a retake quiz for anybody who needs it, and also letting everybody who was gone last week for the initial quiz, giving them the opportunity to take that quiz on Thursday as well. So once Friday hits, we are diving right back into the book. We're diving into the next section in chapter 1, and we're going to push forward. So I can't sacrifice a lot of days, but I am going to try and get everybody caught up as much as possible over these next 3 days. Okay, guys? All right, so for now, just focus on this assignment, and then tomorrow I'll be really ready to lock it in and clear up any confusions we have with linear equations. All right, guys, hope you guys are doing well. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Let me know if you have any questions throughout the course of the day today. Either email me or request a Google Meet, and we'll figure things out. All right, have a great day, guys.